When most people hear the word cherub, they imagine a small winged child floating among clouds, perhaps holding a harp and smiling peacefully. This image has become deeply embedded in Western culture through centuries of art and religious symbolism, appearing everywhere from church decorations to greeting cards and Renaissance paintings. Yet the cherubim described in the Bible bear almost no resemblance to these familiar figures, and their true appearance is far more mysterious and awe-inspiring. In fact, if someone encountered a biblical cherub exactly as described in Scripture, the experience would likely inspire shock, confusion, and fear rather than comfort. To understand the cherubim, we must set aside many modern assumptions and return to the ancient texts where these beings first appear. The earliest references portray cherubim not as gentle messengers, but as powerful guardians associated directly with the presence and authority of God. One of the first appearances occurs in the book of Genesis, immediately after Adam and Eve are expelled from the Garden of Eden. According to the text, cherubim were placed at the entrance to the garden alongside a flaming sword, guarding the way to the tree of life. Even in this early account, they are not presented as passive observers, but as formidable beings entrusted with a sacred responsibility. Throughout the Old Testament, cherubim repeatedly appear in places connected to divine holiness, heavenly power, and the boundary between the human and divine realms. Their importance becomes even more evident in the construction of the Ark of the Covenant, one of the most sacred objects in ancient Israelite religion. The Ark was designed with two golden cherubim positioned above it, facing one another with their wings extended over the mercy seat. This imagery symbolized the throne of God, suggesting that the cherubim functioned as attendants or guardians of the divine presence itself. Yet despite their significance, the Bible provides surprisingly little straightforward information about what cherubim actually looked like. The most detailed descriptions emerge in the extraordinary visions of the prophet Ezekiel, whose writings contain some of the most unusual imagery in all of Scripture. While standing among the exiles in Babylon, Ezekiel reports witnessing a heavenly vision unlike anything he had ever seen before. He describes living creatures possessing human-like forms, but also features that seem almost impossible to visualize. Each creature possessed 4 faces simultaneously: a human face, a lion's face, an ox's face, and the face of an eagle. These multiple faces may have symbolized different aspects of creation, representing intelligence, strength, service, and majesty united within a single being. The creatures also possessed multiple wings, and their movements appeared perfectly coordinated as they traveled in harmony with the divine throne. Perhaps the most famous detail involves the mysterious wheels associated with these beings, enormous structures covered entirely with eyes. The wheels moved wherever the creatures moved, creating a vision so strange and complex that readers have debated its meaning for thousands of years. Later in his writings, Ezekiel explicitly identifies these living creatures as cherubim, connecting them directly to the heavenly court surrounding God. For many modern readers, these descriptions raise an obvious question: were the cherubim intended to be understood literally or symbolically? The answer depends largely on one's religious and theological perspective, and scholars continue to debate the issue today. Some interpret Ezekiel's vision as symbolic imagery, intended to communicate spiritual truths beyond the limits of ordinary language. Others believe the prophet was describing an authentic supernatural experience, using the closest comparisons available to him. Regardless of interpretation, the descriptions clearly emphasize that cherubim were not ordinary beings and were never intended to resemble humans with simple feathered wings. Ancient cultures throughout the Near East often depicted hybrid guardian creatures, combining human and animal features. Massive statues featuring wings, animal bodies, and human faces guarded palaces and temples across several ancient civilizations. Some scholars believe the biblical cherubim may have drawn upon similar symbolic traditions while expressing uniquely Israelite religious ideas. Rather than borrowing directly from surrounding cultures, biblical authors may have adapted familiar imagery to communicate the majesty and sovereignty of God. This would help explain why cherubim appear repeatedly in contexts involving sacred spaces, divine authority, and heavenly worship. Another fascinating aspect of the cherubim is their role as guardians of boundaries between the ordinary world and the divine realm. In Eden, they guard access to the tree of life, while in the tabernacle and temple they symbolize the holiness surrounding God's presence. Again and again, they appear where heaven and earth seem to intersect, standing at the threshold between humanity and the sacred. Because of this role, cherubim are often associated not merely with protection, but with the profound mystery of the divine itself. They remind readers that the God of the Bible is not something that can be approached casually or fully understood through ordinary human experience. Over the centuries, however, artistic traditions gradually transformed the image of the cherubim into something far more familiar and approachable. By the Renaissance, cherubs were frequently depicted as small winged children, inspired partly by classical artistic traditions rather than biblical descriptions. These charming figures became so popular that many people eventually assumed they represented the cherubim of Scripture. Yet the original texts present something entirely different: powerful heavenly beings associated with divine glory, cosmic symbolism, and sacred guardianship. Far from being decorative figures, the cherubim stand among the most important and mysterious entities in biblical literature. Their appearance challenges ordinary imagination, while their role reveals how ancient authors understood the relationship between heaven, earth, and the divine. In future episodes, we will explore the seraphim with their 6 wings, the mysterious Ophanim known as the wheels within wheels, and the broader hierarchy of angels described in Jewish and Christian traditions. We will also examine how these extraordinary beings influenced art, theology, and religious imagination across thousands of years. Because the deeper we explore the biblical world, the clearer it becomes that the cherubim were never meant to be cute or comforting. They were meant to inspire awe before a reality far greater, stranger, and more mysterious than anything found in ordinary human experience.